What's up, everybody? My name's Liv. M, who's usually here, is taking a break, and we are your PsycKicks. So today we're going to be talking about unicorns because so many people have asked, and we've actually made a podcast for this video already. Are you ready? Okay, let's go. Okay, so what do you guys think about when you hear the word unicorn? I'm sure it's a lot of like pop culture thingies that are to do with now, current times, like Lisa Frank stickers, unicorns, the pretty white unicorns that you'd buy or like win at the fair when you would play like the squirt gun game or something. That is what unicorns are currently in our culture, at least here in the US of A. But and like Europe, those types of things, I would say the Western culture of the unicorn idea, but they actually got their origins from the East. And that's what we're going to talk about leading up to how we perceive unicorns today. Knuckle and buckle. Let's go. So Eastern inspirations for unicorn mythology originate from the Indus unicorn. So to begin to understand how the mythology of unicorns came to be, we need to start where the roots of everything came from. Now, there was a society called the Indus civilization that dates back to around 300 to 1300 BCE. The Indus Valley civilization came around along with the Mesopotamian and Egyptian civilizations, and they were one of the most majorly influential civilizations along with those other two during that time in history. Now, it's important to remember that this era in history, the 3000 to 1300 BCE, was the Bronze Age. So we started to have coins and things like that as, monetary compensation of stuff. So in the Indus civilization, imagine it. Someone traveling through the valley of the Indus civilization and you come across a coin. And this coin has the side profile view of an animal that looks similar to a horse or a bison or a cow, and since it's the side profile, it has one horn protruding out the side of its head. But you're not from here, you're not from around town, but this is a coin that someone gave to you, or you found it because you're like an archaeologist or someone that lived after the Indus civilization, but where they used to be. That side profile view on coins is one of the earliest ideas of where the concept of unicorns came from. Pretty darn cool, huh? Let's talk about the coin for a second. So, certain elite members of the Indus Valley Society chose to differentiate themselves from other groups by labeling their attire and certain personal items with a seal. Many of these personal belongings, turned artifacts now today, were decorated with the depiction of a horse-like animal shown in profile, with a single horn protruding from its skull. It was usually depicted near sacred water or other offerings. Thus, the Indus unicorn led to the creature's mystique as a sacred and mysterious animal. Because, I don't know, if I was someone walking around in the middle of nowhere and saw this inscription or say seal or label on something, I'd be like, seems like they were pretty important with all of these fun things around them. Alright, so moving on from the Indus idea of the unicorn, we have so many other things that start to happen. So we have Chinese unicorn. So we start with the Indus Valley unicorn with its head on the seal. Now we're moving to the Chinese unicorn, which honestly is one of my favorites, so get ready. So the Chinese unicorn, also known as the Quilin, is often depicted as a dragon with either scales or fur and a single protruding horn from its forehead. The Quilin is associated with the birth or death of an important person. And literally, they said sage when I was reading this. I'll have the sources to the information that I used below, so if you're excited and want to go down your own rabbit hole, you can start with the sources that I have for this video or used for this video. But when they said sage, like the birth or death of an important person, it's Chinese culture, so they said sage, which is an important person. And the only thing I could think of with my Naruto brain was like Master Jiraiya. Can you imagine just like a dragon going through the sky and Master Jiraiya is born? Anyways, so these unicorns were said to never disturb any part of earthly life, not even a single blade of grass. In order to keep their peaceful existence, they were said to be able to delicately walk on water and even glide over the land. They carried a gentle, benevolent demeanor and were able to get along with all walks of life. So, in a fun fact, in 1414, the Ming Emperor was gifted a Quilin, only to find out later that it was actually a giraffe.
Cool. Our country is broken. What?
Could you imagine someone's like, I got you a dragon, and then you find out it's a giraffe? It's anyways, okay. So, oh, also, do we have Disney fans out there? No, I don't think it's Disney. It might have been Universal. One of those two big giant movie things made Sisu from Raya and the Last Dragon. So I think Sisu is actually a depiction or like goes off the idea of the Chinese Qilin, although I think Sisu, the character, had 2 horns instead of 1. But she's still a dragon, benevolent, has powers, and like kept the peace on Earth. And that goes a lot, I think, with the Chinese Qilin unicorn mythology. Okay, so moving on to Islamic unicorns. Isn't this crazy, like how all of us as like Westerners thought that unicorns were just like born upon the times of dragons and medieval things, but really they're like, they started in the Indus civilization during the Bronze Age? It's ridiculous. Absolutely blows my mind. So the Islamic unicorns. First Islamic unicorn is called the Karkaddan. And I think that's the only way you can say that word. Honestly, there should be no other way that you say it. It has to be in like an epic, like, Karkaddan type thing. Otherwise, it's just not the same. So, unlike the benevolent Qilin, the Karkaddans were depicted as fearsome and bloodthirsty, said to actively hunt humans, and anyone that heard their cries would die. So today we think unicorns are like associated with purity and like love and happiness and rainbows and butterflies and all of that stuff. But the Islamic origins of Karkaddans are much more fearsome and scary. So there's one story of a Karkaddan who defeats its mortal enemy, the elephant. Cause like think about it. I mean, if you're like a single horned creature and you're like, what would my mortal enemy be besides eating humans and like being bloodthirsty? An elephant, because only one of us can have cool horns. You know what I'm saying? It makes too much sense. So one of the stories of a Karkaddan is that the Karkaddan defeats its mortal enemy, the elephant, by impaling it with its horns so deeply that it can't get unstuck from its opponent. Very different idea of a unicorn from what we think and Lisa Frank has given to us during our childhoods, right? So based off of this information, what do you think the Islamic Karkaddan would look like? I'll just give you a second. Let me know in the comments below what you think a Karkaddan would look like before I tell you what people think it looked like. Okay, you ready? Go. Alright, so one very old text, the Karkaddan was depicted by Polymath al-Biruni as a scaly buffalo with yellowed hooves and a horned nose. So this guy, very scholarly, eclectic man, was like, this is what a Karkaddan is. It is a scaly buffalo with yellow hooves and a horned nose. Based off that depiction now, what do you think a Karkaddan was, or what this man might have been looking at that he thought was a Karkaddan but was already an animal? It was a rhino. Isn't that crazy? I don't know. I feel like unicorns are just one giant game of telephone that people have just passed on through generations and generations and generations. So, from his depiction, Polymath al-Biruni, his depiction, the idea of a Karkaddan was interpreted from that by many other people and mistranslated and embellished to create even more zoological amalgamations, such as winged antelopes, horses, some feline figures, and other mismatched creatures. So from that depiction, the idea of a unicorn just exploded. One account describes a Karkaddan having the head of a camel, the body of a mule, and tails and hooves of a bull. But another depiction retold the Karkaddan being an elephant-horse mashup, which I feel like if you know the one story about the elephant being the Karkaddan's mortal enemy, then I feel like you couldn't, it'd be just rude to the Karkaddan saying that you look like that, but I don't know. Maybe it is like the whole you are what you eat thing. All right. So a medieval geographer named Muhammad al-Idris writes that the Karkaddan's horn is so big that you cannot wrap both your hands around it. And a naturalist named al-Damiri insisted that the horn was so heavy that the creature could not even hold up its own head. I feel like that would be problematic for lots of reasons. Anyways, next rendition of a Eastern unicorn is called the Shadhavar. So, the Shadhavar makes me think about Emily. She's here in spirit. Makes me think about Emily because she did a lot of her artwork in college based on like animal nature mashups. So this Shadhavar makes me think about something that she would have drawn during her collegiate art days. So the Shadhavar is depicted as a deer-like animal that sprouts hollowed out branches from its single horn. Its bare tree-like horn creates enticing music as the wind passes through its branches. However, from the music that's created from the branches on its head, unsuspecting victims are drawn by, and then the Shadhavar eats them. So they just got like wind chimes that spout from their head so that they can lure victims in to eat them. Doesn't sound like a nice unicorn that I would want to see. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some folklore that unicorns have been told in before they sort of reached, our neck of the woods, in the West. So one folklore tale is from Persia, and this story tells of a unicorn horn being ground up and mixed with dust, then sprinkled over bandits found on the outskirts of a city who were poised to rob it. The hero sprinkles the unicorn dust on the sleeping bandits, causing them to become paralyzed. And because the bandits cannot move, they cannot steal from the people, and the town is saved. So this story and others like it started to create more and more ideas about what unicorns could be, who they are, and how they kind of fit in the mystical spiritual society. So one of those things is the magical properties of unicorns. Let's talk about there's probably so many of you that love Harry Potter, and I think it was like Voldemort. That was trying to suck the blood of the unicorns because it gives you eternal life or whatever, but then you get really bad side effects like indigestion, I'm sure, or just being evil, and those types of things those stories originated from things like this. Unicorn horns were sold by hunters and bought by the elite for their alleged magical and healing powers. Many horns were made into cups or staffs and prized by royalty and seen as sacred. Queen Elizabeth, actually, the original OG redheaded Queen Elizabeth, that one, she actually has a staff made out of unicorn horn, quote unquote. There's a unicorn horn in it. But most of these horns that people have, history has said are unicorn horns, are found in all of these elite, very important people's houses or, vaults, wherever they keep their safe jewelry and prized possessions or whatever. Those horns they've been tested genetically, and they are usually narwhal horns or rhino horns. And lots of other people have said that, the magical healing properties of unicorn horns can also include curing illnesses, keeping a horse standing. You can heat cold water with a unicorn horn instead of having to use heat. And you can also ward off evil forces with a unicorn horn. So all of those things came together to create more of the folklore and fantasy behind unicorns. So now let's get to the transition between the Eastern ideas of unicorns with, Karkaddans and Shadhavars and Quilins over to our Western ideas of unicorns. So around 400 BCE, Greek physician, I think it's pronounced Ctesias, reported Indian unicorns to have crimson heads, multicolored horns, and shapely ankles. So if you don't know, most of what the West believes or got a lot of their inspiration for cultural and societal things today was from the Greeks. So it's important to note that what the Greek philosophers and Greek scholars have to say about unicorns that they learned from Indian ideas, which is the East. So it's that transition of East to West ideas and that sharing of information. Remember, a giant game of telephone is what created unicorns as we know it today. So Ctesias reported Indian unicorns to have crimson heads, multicolored horns, and shapely ankles. And he noted their bloodthirsty nature. So Ctesias is still keeping, the Karkaddan and Shadhavar stuff going strong. He noted that unicorns are capable of outrunning any animal they are put up against, and they're only vulnerable when they leave their foals to graze. But they rarely do that because they're superb parents, just immaculate parents. And that they're noted, unicorns, to prey upon hunters and kill them, as well as their horses. So Pliny wrote of a beast called monoceros. So monoceros in Greek translates to meaning single horn. It was said to have a stag's head, an elephant's feet, a boar's tail, and a single black horn. And Claudius Aelianus described his version of the unicorn as a red-haired horse with a curly pigtail and a spiraling horn. Now lastly, Aristotle's depiction of a unicorn is that of a goat with a single horn who floats or flies as his mode of transportation, and he floats or flies across the earth without touching the ground. Now this would lead to the association of unicorns being male, and that is very prevalent in medieval times and like that sort of Renaissance to medieval transition era. Now there's also Abrahamic scripture, which was mistranslated from its original Hebrew, where the word ra'em, meaning ox, was translated to the Greek monoceros, taken to mean unicorn. So they took ox, which is something that you could see if you look all the way back to the Indus civilization, that ox that was on the coin, the seal, the depiction. So now we're talking about Abrahamic scripture where ra'em in the scripture, which means ox, was translated into monoceros, which means unicorn. So if you look at the cuneiform, it looks like an equal sign with like I don't know what the word is called, but like the little carrot top sideways pointing to the right. So they mistranslated that cuneiform into being a single horn, but actually it's supposed to be read the other way with the two lines that look like an equal sign to be the two horns instead of the other way around. So you can definitely see where the mistranslation came from. Regardless, the unicorn's ferocious nature is carried on a few centuries, which can be seen in various Christian excerpts. So around 370 CE, Saint Basil warns of a unicorn in his collected homilies on the creation story. One passage states, quote, "And take heed unto thyself, O man, and beware the unicorn who is the demon." He then says, quote, "The unicorn will gouge and devour man, and that the epic power of the unicorn compares only with the unconquerable strength of God." Which, if you ask me, seems very cautionary, yet also very doesn't make a lot of sense, honestly. He's like, the unicorns are terrible, but also there's nothing more powerful other than God. And you're like, okay, cool, got it, awesome, very clear, very concise. There's no questions there at all. So an anonymously authored book called The Physiologies, or Physiologus, I think it's Physiologus, final answer, is a Christian natural history text written sometime between the 2nd and 4th century. It describes the unicorn as a baby goat-sized creature with a fierce attitude that could only be lured for capture using a virgin as bait. Thus, the association of the unicorn and the Virgin Mother Mary was born. Pun intended. And you can also see where, I think we said it was Aristotle's, let me go back, let me see. Yeah, Aristotle's depiction of a unicorn as a goat, which is interesting. Alright, so next is the idea of unicorns being associated with Christ, which was cool for a while until Pope Gelasius put the kibosh on the whole idea. He declared that the whole thing was heretical, so that the unicorn was not associated to Jesus, the unicorn was not associated to the Mother Mary, and none of those things were holy or anything like that. He was like, no unicorns, never, we're done with it. Shut it down. So he declared that the unicorn was heretical in 496. So now that the unicorn was back to its proverbial forbidden fruit.
Just lick it. Forget it, lick it.
Haha. Anyways, people got jiggy with the idea of the unicorn and it exploded across Europe in the Middle Ages and the medieval times. So, the Christian story of Saints Barlaam and Jehoshaphat tell about the monstrous unicorn. So Saint Barlaam is teaching about the inevitability of death using the unpredictability of the world with a unicorn parable. So his story goes, basically, a man ends up being chased into a well of snakes and hanging onto a tree branch for dear life while a unicorn is waiting outside with a lobster bib on to eat him, basically. Lobster bib I don't think was really put in the story, but you know, we're talking about the telephone history of unicorns. We're gonna add the lobster bib per me. So the unicorn does eat the man that is like hanging from a tree branch in a well full of snakes, but the guy hangs out with the snakes trying to prolong his fate of being eaten by a unicorn as an hors d'oeuvre. And this creates the ideas of unicorns being associated with death, even being able to detect and kill false virgins. So it's just, I don't know, people took this story of a guy who got chased into a well by a unicorn, who hung on to a tree branch where there were snakes underneath him and was like, I'm just gonna sit here and contemplate life and death for a second, but eventually I'm just gonna get eaten anyway, so why would I prolong it? I mean, I don't know. It seems like a scary story to me. Sounds like one of those like cautionary tales that the Germans tell their children type thing. But, you know, he ends up getting eaten by a unicorn anyways, and because of this story of Saint Barlaam and Jehoshaphat that they created, now unicorns were associated with death and being able to kill false virgins. Let's get into the artsy-fartsy side of it. So The Hunt of the Unicorn is a 7 tapestry series created in the 1500s, and it was lost for a long time until it was found. The reemergence of the unicorn's mythology was brought back when these tapestries were rediscovered many years later. So each tapestry describes a unicorn being caught using a virgin and then killed. And this is thought to be a parallel representation of the story of Christ's crucifixion. So there's 7 tapestries. They're not together, they're all separate, and they were found in different parts of like Europe, I believe. Don't quote me on that. They were just found in different areas, not just one person owned them. And then once people were like, found one and then found another, they were like, wait, these are related. And then they put them all together, and it does create this story of a unicorn being captured and killed using a virgin by all of these people that are like fox hunting, basically. And a lot of people think that it has a correlation between the unicorn representation of Jesus, which was born when the tapestries were born, and then, you know, Pope Gelasius put the kibosh on everything, and this person was like, listen, I'm gonna go against the Pope and all of the other cool things. I'm gonna make these tapestries and then sell them to individual people, and no one's gonna know. How are they gonna know? Who's gonna know? And then we found out. We knew. So, the Scotland coat of arms also has a depiction, for all of our Scottish viewers out there, what's up, has a depiction, their coat of arms, of the original lions, or not lions, the original unicorns. The reason I said lions is because I think the unicorns in the coat of arms for Scotland have lion tails, or something like that, and they're very different and much more tailored toward the eye of what the unicorn was, and the like huge representation of a lot of different cool things historically going on at that time in the unicorn of their coat of arms, which is cool. Unicorns, people ask, are they real? Yes, they are. However, each old world account can be traced to a real living being, such as the Indian rhino, the Tibetan antelope, the onager, or the kayan, both kayang, which are both types of donkeys, and in the case of the Indus Valley unicorn, the animals depicted in the seals were actually most likely representations of Aroksh or Araksh. They're a type of large wild cattle who are the descendants of today's domestic cattle. So all of those accounts that all of these people had were of real animals, but because of everyone's just splendor, wonder, and whatever about these things, it's translated in the giant game of telephone that people love to create into the unicorns that we know today. Fun fact, Some people believe the idea of unicorns could even date back to prehistoric times. So before the Indus Valley unicorn story happened, or came about, I should say. So cave drawings and bones found from a creature named Elasmotherium could have inspired the unicorn's presence during human time. And if you don't know, Elasmotherium was a giant shaggy rhino. So dinosaurs' bones also have led people to believe that giants existed at one point in time. I believe, fun fact, don't quote me, but I believe my ADHD brain remembers that. I think it was George Washington believed that giants lived during our time in America because giant dinosaur bones were found, and they were like, listen, these have to belong to the giants that roamed the earth. So just things like that. Makes me happy how people think about things and then just create all of these fabulous, wonderful stories that we get to share today. So spiral horned and all white horses, that was the typical unicorn of today. But throughout all of these stories, the rare, exotic, and incapable aspects of these creatures not being able to be captured and having this elusive mysticism around them is what has kept their story alive today. All right, so the last thing I wanted to talk about is this little nugget of information that I found, which I thought was pretty, how do I say, inspiring and lovely. And it's something that I didn't know. But if you guys knew it, let me know in the comments below if this is something that you knew about or experienced, or if there's any way that you could spread the love. So the queer community have taken the unicorn to represent their ideology as well. Just like, you know, Scotland has their coat of arms, and all these other people and nations and like cultures have unicorns to represent certain aspects of things. So the queer community has taken the unicorn to represent their ideology as well, as a creature which shuns the status quo and reminds others how special and resilient they are. And today, Ukrainian soldiers have been sewing unicorn patches onto their uniforms as an expression of pride, solidarity, and the desire to be seen, using the unicorn's subjective interpretation to just echo resilience, solidarity, and being a little bit unique, all at the same time. So, if you guys liked this video, let me know in the comments below. Next week, we're going to be talking about some even cooler stories, so tune in next time. And until then, we are your PsycKicks. Peace.